To the war in Sudan next. And Reuters says the United States is imposing sanctions on Sudanese leader and army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan for his role in atrocities and refusal to participate in peace talks. The move comes after the Sudanese Army retook a key town from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The RSF leadership confirmed that it had lost control of Wad Madani, a crossroad of key supply lines that link several states. The capital of al-Gezira state, the town is strategically situated south of Khartoum. Analysts say its recapture could mark a significant turning point in the war, which the Army and the RSF have been fighting since April 2023. The return of the Army triggered scenes of joy across the country and in the retaken town.
Residents of Wad Madani dance in the streets with Sudanese Army soldiers. People here are celebrating the ouster of the Rapid Support Forces. Many have stories to tell of suffering, the looting of their homes and other abuse.
If we had money, the RSF took it saying, "Give us your money." They wore us out with their, "Where are you going? Where are you coming from? What did you bring?" Every day a new militia, new people appearing. Once we got used to them, new ones came in.
Safety is restored with the control of the armed forces and allies in el-Gezira state. We are talking to you from inside Madani. We tell everyone that this city is safe. People can safely go back to their homes.
RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, widely known as Hemeti, admitted Madani's loss but denies the abuses. Just a week ago, the US accused his paramilitaries and allied militias of genocide and sanctioned him. Sudanese army allies also stand accused of inhuman acts. Rights group allege that militias killed 13 people in el-Gezira, including 2 children, who were accused of collaborating with the RSF. The army has denied that it was involved in assaults on civilians in the state, and its deputy leader promised that Madani was just the beginning.
If we are happy with this victory that took place in Madani, we say that there's still a lot in front of us. This is a big victory that we thank God for. But we are not stopping. We are going swiftly. We are in a hurry. And God willing, soon every inch of this country will be cleansed. Cleansed from the traitors, their terrorist militias, cleansed from our treacherous Sudanese brothers, and cleansed from all the countries and organisations that support these traitors. We tell them that Sudan is strong with its people. Sudan is strong with its military.
Despite the fall of Madani, the RSF still holds most of the rest of el-Gezira state, as well as Western Darfur and much of the south of the country.
I'd like to welcome Hamid Khalafallah, a Sudan researcher and policy analyst in the United Kingdom. He's currently exploring political transitions and the roles of grassroots movements throughout Africa. Hamid, let's start with the Sudanese Army's recapture of Wad Madani. How significant is that?
It is definitely a very significant development in the course of Sudan war. The recapture of Wad Madani, is very strategic, given the strategic location of Wad Madani and al-Gezira states at large. Wad Madani is and al-Gezira state sits at the crossroad of many important routes that are very important for moving goods and stuff from different states and into Khartoum, particularly the capital of Sudan, where the Rapid Support Forces and Sudanese armed forces are fighting it out. But it's also because it's the heartland of agriculture in Sudan and in Africa, where the largest agricultural schemes are located. And it's very important to get these agricultural schemes running to support the food crisis that Sudan is facing. The Rapid Support Forces for the past year or so have stopped Sudanese citizens in al-Gezira state from farming, and this now could be a way to get that back on running.
Might we look back at some point and call this a seminal moment?
Absolutely. The recapture of Wad Madani paves the way for the Sudanese armed forces, obviously, to try to recapture a lot of the parts that are currently under the rapid support forces control in Khartoum. And with that, the Sudanese armed forces will have almost full control over the central, northern, and eastern parts of the country. And that would leave the rapid support forces with the areas, Darfur and some of the other western areas where they're most comfortable and have most support and logistic routes and so on and so forth. And there have been a lot of speculations that this scenario might be part of an internationally brokered deal where the rapid support forces end up with this part and the Sudanese armed forces end up with this part, and then that might open avenues for peace and so on. But I'm not sure to what extent the split would bring actual peace to Sudan.
As you probably know, this week the U.S. determined the RSF and its allied militias had committed genocide in Sudan and imposed sanctions on its leader, Hamid. To what extent might this sour public sentiment against them at a time when they're not only fighting for ground on the battlefield, but also their own legitimacy?
Well, obviously, the sentiment against the rapid support forces has been sour for quite some time. Sudanese, analysts and observers on the ground, international human rights organizations have been suggesting that the rapid support forces committed a genocide in West Darfur in particular and other parts of Darfur for the past year or so. So I think this determination comes very late. And a lot of lives could have been saved had it come earlier. However, it's a positive development also that it came now. And this is an important part of conditions that you set to, have more leverage. But the problem is that it's happening outside of a peace process or a strategy towards the peace process. So whatever leverage you are getting now over the rapid support forces out of the sanctions on Hamid, the leader of the rapid support forces, or the genocide determination is almost, going to waste because it's not being utilized into a peace process.
Turkey has gotten involved in mediation efforts. How hopeful are you that they can help bring peace to Sudan?
I think, Turkey being involved now, this potentially brings more of the regional allies of both warring factions or the regional backers of both warring factions to the mediation table. And that will potentially get us closer to an end of this war. For the past, almost 2 years now, a lot of the regional backers were not taken into consideration when designing these peace processes. However, I think also we need more pressure to be exerted on the regional backers, particularly from Western countries, powerful countries like the US, who have leverage over the Emirates and over Egypt. And that has not been used yet. And without that, I don't think any of the peace initiatives would yield positive outcomes.
You talk about pressure. I wonder, from your perspective, are there any signs that the humanitarian crisis, the famine, the sexual violence, the massive numbers of displaced people are providing pressure for the two sides to negotiate peace?
So, absolutely. So the humanitarian situation on the ground, all the violence that Sudanese citizens have seen and so on is very well documented. And it kind of has been, presented to international organizations at the UN level and so on, to use that as evidence and to exert further pressures on the warring factions. However, that has not been used properly. We have the ICC investigating in Darfur, but that needs to be extended to the entire country so that these investigations could go further. And we have, yes, there have been steps now with, the sanctions on Hamid and the genocide determination and so on. But there's a lot of evidence that suggests that, famine and starvation are being used as a weapon by both warring factions, and that is not being taken into consideration. So there is a lot of evidence, there is a lot of documentation of the human rights violations, but it's not being used properly to exert pressures on both warring factions.
We're going to have to end it there. Our deep thanks to policy analyst Hamid Khalafallah.